So last week, after the Israeli government murdered 60 Palestinians and injured more than 2,000, there were numerous right-wingers that rushed to Israel's defense. But surprisingly, or unsurprisingly really at this point, there were some so-called liberals who decided to also rationalize what Israel did. So if you tuned into the latest episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, he brought on New York Times opinion piece writer Bari Weiss, who is an alleged liberal, and together they basically explained why what Israel did in committing crimes against humanity really wasn't Israel's fault. In fact, we should blame Hamas for what Israel did. And if we believe that Israel did anything wrong, then we're getting duped by Hamas. So basically, they made the same argument that right-wingers made and that Donald Trump's administration made. And again, these are supposedly liberals. So we'll go ahead and watch it, and then I have quite a bit to say when we come back.
I love you, but the riots were not caused by the embassy move.
No, I said they were linked.
They're not linked.
They are.
No, they're not.
Yes,
Okay.
They were made much worse. These demonstrations were going on, but they exploded
When Hamas
with the
attacked
embassy.
Israel in 2008, when Hamas attacked Israel in 2012, and it attacked Israel in 2014, the embassy was in Tel Aviv, all of those times. Okay? This was an intentional, first of all, these protests had been going on for 6 weeks, and they intentionally moved up the day so that it would coincide with the opening of the embassy move, so that we would all be disgusted and heartbroken when we saw this horrible split screen of Ivanka Trump looking like she was at a country club next to poor, desperate people dying in Gaza.
I agree with you. They planned that. Absolutely.
Right. And I'm just saying, let's not fall for a trap that is being set by a theocratic, authoritarian group that is sending women and children
I don't think I'm falling for a trap.
Shield.
I agree. I couldn't agree more with all of that. What I'm saying is that there is this idea, and I would call it the soft bigotry of low expectations. I've said that before when people booed me on this subject. But I think they're the bigots when they just assume that if something goes on in this part of the world, as you said, there's going to be riots. And you can't organize your foreign policy around, geez, what is Mohammed Atta going to do?
It kills me that Trump and the Republican Party are turning Israel, which should be a progressive issue, into a right-wing one. And I think it's outrageous.
That happened a while ago.
Yeah, but it's now not one single Democratic politician showed up at the embassy.
Israel did that under Obama, went to war with Obama and the Democrats. If anyone turned Israel into a right-wing issue over the last 9 years, it was
But the hypocrisy of people who have this position and like, where would you rather live if you were in the Middle East? In Gaza,
right. There's
under
not going to be
Sharia
a
law,
queer pride
or Tel
parade in
Aviv.
Gaza.
It's not your values that they're defending.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I really shouldn't have to talk about this clip because I think it speaks for itself. You have self-proclaimed liberals trying to rationalize the murder of innocent human beings. Unbelievable. Now, I want to get to what Bari Weiss said. She states, Hamas moved up the dates so their protest would, quote, coincide with the embassy move, so we would all be disgusted and heartbroken when we saw this horrible split screen of Ivanka Trump looking like she was at a country club next to poor, desperate people dying in Gaza. Let's not fall for a trap that is being set by a theocratic authoritarian group that is sending women and children to be human shields. So think about how inherently dumb that statement is. She's essentially implying here that what Hamas did was they tried to dupe Israel into killing them so that way there would be this violent clash. So you'd see this juxtaposition of Ivanka Trump opening up the embassy and people dying. So let me ask you this. If Hamas was actively trying to dupe Israel into killing innocent women and children, why on earth would Israel fall for what Hamas has apparently done multiple times now, according to you? Shouldn't Israel be smarter and be aware of the tactics that Hamas is trying to execute in order to get their political message across? I mean, why would Israel fall for the same trap over and over and over again? It makes no sense. At what point does Israel say, look, let's just not respond to provocations by Hamas, if that really is what they're trying to do. But the argument that we constantly hear is that, well, the IDF had no choice but to murder innocent Palestinians because they were throwing rocks at them and they were flying arson kites towards the border and they were trying to injure members of the IDF. But ask yourself this: how is Israel's response not unnecessarily hostile when you see the number of Palestinians injured and killed compared to the number of Israelis killed and injured? There were 0. So again, clearly, if you think that Hamas is so calculative and smart to where they're able to dupe Israel into murdering innocent Palestinians in order to suit their agenda, then why would Israel fall for it? You see, this narrative makes absolutely no sense because it's idiotic. To these individuals, Israel is right no matter what, and if you dare to question their tactics, if you dare to question the right-wing government of Israel currently being run by a war criminal who should be in prison right now, then you're anti-Semitic. It's absurd. And then the next thing that Bari Weiss said nearly made my head pop off my body and explode. I mean, it was that insane. She states, "It kills me that Trump and the Republicans are turning Israel, which should be a progressive issue, into a right-wing one." Really now? I mean, I don't even know how to respond to that. I think that Adam Johnson, Affair, had the best response on Twitter. He said, maybe you should connect the fucking dots. Why would progressives defend a right-wing extremist government who constantly murders innocent women and children? In fact, go back through history. What side of South African apartheid were progressives on? We were against apartheid. Progressives are always on the side of human rights. So if you're wondering why progressives are lining up behind you, maybe you should look in the mirror and think about your philosophy with regard to Israel and Palestine. Maybe it's the case that Israel is the aggressor in this situation, even if that thought gives you cognitive dissonance, even if it's really unpleasant for you, because they are. They're the aggressor. They're the ones who are illegally occupying the Palestinian territories. And you don't have to take my word for it. That's what the UN says. The UN declared Israel's occupation illegal. And it is, in fact, an occupation. Think about this. In the event there was a foreign power that just came in and invaded California, do you think that America would respond politely? Do you think we would peacefully assemble? Of course not. Our military would attack them. So I don't advocate for violence, but really what they're saying, what people like Bari Weiss and Bill Maher are saying is that really Palestinians have to shut up and take whatever Israel does. If they use violence to respond to try to stop Israel's illegal occupation, they get lambasted for it. If they try to respond peacefully by protesting, then Israel kills them, and then they still get blamed for being killed when they protest. So they want Palestinians to have no recourse whatsoever, and these people are they're grotesque.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.